That was Prime Minister Harper with Prince Karim Aga Khan yesterday, announcing a new joint project called the Global Center for Pluralism. The Aga Khan is imam to 80,000 Ismaili Muslims here in Canada, 20 million worldwide. Earlier today in Ottawa, I sat down with the Aga Khan to talk about a whole range of global issues, from Canada to Afghanistan. Canada's role in Afghanistan is well known, has been since 9/11. So is the Aga Khan Foundation, which is in there in a big way in development matters. The question is simple, really. With all the help that's been given to Afghanistan, why is the Taliban resurgent? Not only back in numbers, but back in some sense of popularity. Why is that happening?
I think there are a number of reasons, but the one that I would put forward as the most immediate is the slow process of reconstruction. There was a lot of hope that once there was regime change and a new government and the political process had been completed, etc., quality of life would change. And it hasn't changed quickly enough. It's taken much more time than I think many of us had hoped to get to isolated communities in Afghanistan and improve their quality of life. It's an organizational problem, even amongst the donor countries. There have been differences of opinion. The management of the drug problem has not been a united effort by any means. So there are a number of things that have slowed up the process. And there are still acute pockets of poverty in Afghanistan. People who don't have enough food, people who don't have access to any education, any health care. And it's clear this sort of frustration causes bitterness and the search for other solutions.
Well, is there time to turn it around? Because you get a sense that the pendulum has swung back considerably in the last year or so. You're friends with Hamid Karzai. I've talked to him a couple of times in the last couple of years, and last time just a month ago. There's this growing sense among the Canadian people as well, frustration and a belief that it's a war that cannot be won.
I would beg to differ on that. I think what we're seeing in Afghanistan, at least from my own network of activities, is an increasingly visible two-speed process, where in the north and the west you're beginning to see quantifiable change. In the east and the south you're not seeing that. And that two-speed change is going to have to be managed with great care, but it's not a good reason to give up by any means.
Can you do both at the same time? That's the debate in Canada. To run a military operation, talking specifically about the South, while trying to introduce aid and development in an area that is not secure.
Very difficult to do, but necessary. I mean, every step counts. And certainly in areas where there's insecurity, I think the availability for populations to participate in these sort of activities does go down when quality of life changes. And I believe the same thing with regard to the drug problem.
How much of the problem in Afghanistan is a result of the decision on the part of the Americans and the British to move into Iraq?
Very substantial indeed. The invasion of Iraq was something which has mobilized what we call the Ummah, that is, the community of Muslims around the world. Every Muslim that I have ever talked to has felt engaged by this.
On what level, and what do you mean?
Well, Baghdad is one of the great historic cities of the Islamic world. Iraq is not a new country. It's part of the history of our civilization. It's been a pluralist country. Great philosophers, great historians, great scientists. Reverse the question again. What would the Christian world think if a Muslim army attacked Rome? I think there would be a general reaction in the Christian world, not just an Italian reaction.
But it seems that even in the Muslim world, that invasion has caused major divisions, the clash inside Islam itself between Shia and Sunni.
Well, that was entirely predictable.
Mm.
Entirely predictable. There was nothing unpredictable. What you were effectively doing is replacing a Sunni minority government in a country that had a Shia demographic majority. And again, take the case out of its situation. What would happen, and I'm sorry to come back to this, but it's important, if a Muslim army went into Northern Ireland and replaced one Christian interpretation by another? Imagine the fallout that that would cause in the Christian world itself.
So what happens now? I mean, can Iraq be put back together? And who would be doing the putting back together in?
I think that's a very, very difficult question, and I would not want to predict the answer, because I think that the whole process of change in Iraq has regional dimensions which have got to be managed. They're not just national dimensions in Iraq. Those regional dimensions also were predictable, let's be quite frank about it. And I think they're going to need to be managed with very, very great care.
We talked earlier, just briefly touched on the new Global Center for Pluralism, which will be established here in Canada through the Aga Khan Foundation and the people of Canada through the Government of Canada. What is your hope for that? What do you see that doing, accomplishing?
Well, I hope that this center will learn from the Canadian history of pluralism, the bumpy road that all societies have in dealing with pluralist problems, the outcomes, and offer much of the world new thoughts, new ways of dealing with issues, anticipating the problems that can occur. Because in recent years, I think we're seeing more and more around the world that no matter what the nature of the conflict is, ultimately there is a rejection of pluralism as one of the components. Whether it's tribalism, whether it's conflict amongst ethnic groups, whether it's conflict amongst religions, the failure to see value in pluralism is a terrible liability.
Why Canada?
Because I think Canada is a country that is invested in making this potential liability become an asset. And I think that Canada has been perhaps too humble in its own appreciation of this global asset. It's a global asset. And few countries, if any, have been as successful as Canada has. Bumpy though the road is, and as I said earlier, it's always going to be an unfinished task.
Well, for the full interview with the Aga Khan, you can check out Mansbridge One-on-One. It's running on the CBC main network on News World this weekend at times listed right there on your screen. If you have any comments you'd like to share about anything you've seen tonight, please get in touch. Here's how.